the one, the only, Ben
Morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, Ideally Speaking, as we pretty much finish this book, 10 Really Dumb Mistakes that Very Smart Couples Make. We're doing the second half of chapter 15. There is a chapter 16, which is basically a recap. I probably will do that, maybe next week or the week after. And we'll be starting a new book when I get it from Amazon it's called Shidduch Secrets. We're working our way backwards. We did a book about intimacy, now we're doing a book about regular marriage, other parts of marriage, and then we're going to go back to shidduchim, dating. I have a lot of opinions to say about that, about the shidduch system, what to do in the shidduch system, and what could be an alternative to the shidduch system. We'll talk a lot about that. I think it's really interesting. I think most people find it interesting. Let's do the second half of this chapter. He talks about criticizing your spouse, how damaging it is. He says, 3 rules of criticism. Rule number 1, don't do it. Rule number 2, don't do it. Rule number 3, don't do it. Don't do it because it hurts. Don't do it because it distances people. Most of all, don't do it because it doesn't work. And he's right. You shouldn't criticize your spouse, but he does acknowledge that you have to stick up for yourselves. He quotes a story from a single, a bacher. He says, one Friday night I delivered a talk about Shalom Bayis, and a young man whom I had never met followed me out of shul. I don't get it, he says. You talk about being mavater and compromising, sometimes my way and sometimes her way. Why don't you just tell people to be totally mavater, always give in? Isn't it obvious that if you give in all the time, you'll always have shalom bayis? So he said to them, you're single, right? I said to him, yes. How did you know? Because I said, once you're married, you realize that no human being can always give in. I have needs. I have ways of doing things. I may be generous and considerate, but at the end of the day, I'm a person, and so is my spouse. It may seem nice in theory to always give in, but it's not fair to yourself, and it won't work. So he's right about this, 100% right about this, is that, I thought this also going into marriage. You just also be mavater. That's what you're taught in yeshiva. They teach you in chassan classes, unfortunately, most of them teach you that you should always be mavater. Both the husband and wife are both told to be mavater. Which one is mavater? That's when you get married and you try to figure things out. Who should we listen to? People have real needs, and the way I see it, he says the way of dealing with this. As a rule of thumb, he says anything that you could possibly overlook, you should overlook. And he says, in parentheses, I wish I could print this at least 10 times. You would do yourself a great favor if you read it 100 times. Remember, he says, that for every issue that bothers you, your spouse has at least one, or many more that bothers them. To the degree that you're able to let things go, you'll be able to maintain a climate of giving and not a climate of demand. Do your best to just let things go. Now, this I don't agree with. I agree that there has to be compromise, but the things that you should stick up for are not just if I can tolerate it. It has to be things that are relevant to you. Don't let your spouse tell you about being a person if it doesn't really affect them. Religious matters and things like that. Don't let your spouse tell you how you have to look, how you have to dress, how you have to be religious. Don't let them cajole you even to do that. We'll talk about that in a second, about a wife sweet-talking her way, her husband to do something. Please do it for me. Don't listen to that, to the nourishkeit of your woman. Stick up for who you want to be yourself. If you have dreams, aspirations that are realistic in business, in learning, in life, for yourself, things for yourself, those you should be mocking and those you should be careful to maintain independence, because your wife is not a slave, and the more you give in to your wife, she'll become controlling over you. I think I read it yesterday that there was a congregation, I don't know if it was a rabbi or a pastor. He said, all those people that feel that their wives are controlling them, go to the left. So everyone went to the left except one person. So the pastor said, at least I see one person, the wife doesn't control them. So the husband said, my wife told me not to move. So the reality is, people joke about this. Who's the boss? The wife is the boss. Who makes the final decision? Which is completely contrary to just common sense. The husband is the man. He's in charge. He's the king. She's the queen. A man should never defer to his wife. A man should be in control. Everyone knows this, but everyone just ends up giving in to their wives because they don't stand up for themselves and their values and things that are important to them. And besides being damaging, that it hurts you as a person because you don't get things that you want, I'm not talking about things that affect both of you, like finances, spending money, and things like that, which affect both of you. Or kids, how you deal with the kids. Those you should have compromises. Maybe the husband's values are different than the wife's values. You have to make compromises in those regards. But things for you, I fought really hard for myself to get myself a smartphone, to get myself internet in the house, things like that. How I want to dress. I don't want to wear long sleeve white shirts. I look fun. It looks funny. People walking around here in 95-degree weather in suits and long sleeve shirts. Are you kidding me? I said, I got to wear polo shirts. I wear polo shirts every day over here. I compromise, wear white ones. I'd rather wear colored, but they'll throw me out of the community over here. That's the reality. But they don't give me Aaliyah's ones. Once I put on the polo shirts, I tuck my sisters in. I don't like it. It doesn't look nice. Doesn't look neat. I don't wear a black hat either. It doesn't look nice. I don't do strange things. I don't do these things. They're weird. They're strange. And I'm not going to wear a short sleeve white button-down shirt because you look like a nerd like that. I care about how I look, and those things I'm going to fight for. I'm going to fight very hard for those things that affect me and affect me only. I have a right and discretion to do that. Besides the fact that you're being a weakling and not getting what you want, it shows your wife that she's dominant over you, and the kids will see that, and she'll get more courage to tell you to do things, and you'll become her slave, which happens in 99% of marriages, which is very sad. And he says, he gives you 4 rules for communication, right? You have to communicate. Because if you want to stick up for the things that are important to you, you don't want to criticize your wife, or the wife doesn't want to criticize her husband. So you have to communicate. That's essential. Communication equals marriage, basically. If you can't communicate effectively, you're not going to have a marriage. Now, again, I'm going to reiterate this for the millionth time because he doesn't say this in the book, because I think this is where the book is sorely lacking, and I would make this as a preface to the book, and I would repeat it in every chapter. Just got a call from Amazon. They're delivering something. Yes, I introduced Amazon Prime into my family because I buy things for myself from there, and I want things, and that's important to me. My wife also likes shopping there also. So basically, the point is that he should be reiterating in this book, is that the key to marriage is the bedroom. If everything is good in the bedroom, everything will be good in your marriage for 2 reasons. First of all, inherently, if you get married for the bedroom, both spouses are supposed to enjoy it the most of anything. That's why you get married. At least in the from Jewish world, you can't do anything else besides getting married. And if your needs are taken care of, you'll be happy, both of you. But even more important than that is that in order for it to have success in the bedroom, you have to communicate in the most personal way. You're communicating about something which is really personal to both of you. And if you have effective communication in really personal things, then you'll have effective communication outside of the bedroom also about other things. And you'll actually be able to tell the other spouse what's bothering you. The biggest problem he doesn't talk about, the reason people have poor communication is because their complaints are not really complaints about that thing. That's not really what's bothering them. They're really bothered by something else, whether they're bothered by the bedroom or because they don't have effective communication in the bedroom, so they don't have effective communication outside of the bedroom. And they're saying one thing, but what's really bothering them is inside, either consciously or subconsciously. They're just not focusing on what's bothering them. And you're never going to have real communication, then you'll never be able to resolve issues. If we go ahead and negotiate, and I lay exactly what I want on the table, you go to business negotiation. I want to sell my company for $300,000. He only wants to buy it for $150,000. So we both know what we're doing. This is really what we mean. When it comes to money, you're going to communicate. So you work some compromise somewhere in the middle, because that's really your real opinion. But oftentimes in marriage, consciously or subconsciously, one spouse or both spouses will not tell the other one what's really bothering them, and that's the worst possible thing. So his assumption of how to make the right compromise, how to have effective communication, is based right on already having a good relationship in the bedroom and having effective communication in the bedroom, which leads you to have effective communication outside the bedroom. And then you could read this. that's he's presuming that you know this and you have effective communication, but the reality is 99% of the time people don't have communication because they don't know how to communicate. They're not telling you what's really bothering them. So this is pretty much worthless, his rules of communication, because it's not really going to help. But I'll read them anyway. I'll go through them anyway, assuming that you do have a perfect marriage and everything's good and you can communicate exactly what you want, what's on your mind. Rule number 1, he says, never in the heat of the moment, right? If your wife did something to you, don't talk about it. So rule number 1 is basically that never in the heat of the moment, that when you're arguing and you have something against your wife or the wife has something against the husband they did to them, when they did it, don't start fuming at them and criticizing them right when they did it, because oftentimes you're angry. When you're angry, you're not going to communicate effectively. You're going to yell. You're going to criticize maybe more than you should, and include other things, like you mentioned, other things besides this the other spouse does against you, and the other person can become defensive, and it's not going to be good. Rule number 2, he says, use I statements. Don't say you never clean up. Say I like a very neat room. Both of these rules I do agree with 100%. If you have good communication and you're talking about the things that really bother you, it's definitely helpful to not say anything right away, to wait, and also to use I statements, talk about how it bothers you. Definitely very helpful. Rule number 3, he said, is to compliment first. Rule number 3 is to compliment first, is basically that any expression of displeasure has to be preceded by at least one sincere, real compliment, preferably more than one. He said there was a story. A young man once said to me, Rabbi, I tried your method, it doesn't work. She still ends up just as hurt, even though he complimented her before criticizing her. I asked him what he meant. He explained, since I heard you speak about this, anytime I have something negative to say, I'll proceed with a compliment. And right away she says, what did I do wrong now? Sorry, Rabbi, your trick doesn't work. So he answered back. I don't know if he answered directly, but he answers back in the book. He says, if the only time you say nice things to your spouse is when you have a complaint, it won't go over very well. And if you use this as a trick or a gimmick to get away with criticizing your spouse, it's not going to work. If you have an occasional legitimate compliment, it'll be easier to listen to if you proceed with a compliment. But the only time your spouse hears a compliment is when you are about to critique her, you have a problem. You should always, he says, complimenting, praising, and expressing appreciation should be a part of the normal give and take in your marriage. Now, even though this seems obvious, the reality is when you live with someone together, especially after a couple of years, it's very hard. Couples don't give compliments that often to each other. Sometimes they do, but not that often. And I think this idea, even if you would give compliments once in a while, you're not going to give compliments the whole day. It's patronizing a little bit. It's saying, okay, you look really beautiful. You have really nice hair. I like the way your hair is. By the way, you don't never do the dishes. It's patronizing. It makes it worse. I don't agree with that. The fourth rule he says, is to start soft. He says there was a story. Apparently he used to smoke cigars, and he had 6-hour drives from Rochester, New York to Queens. He would smoke a cigar, and it would be very small by the time he got those. He said, I really enjoyed those cigars. One day I stopped smoking them. Cold turkey. I haven't smoked a cigar since, because on that day, my wife turned to me and said in her soft voice, quote, please stop smoking. Do it for me, please. Ooh, what a low blow. Had she said it's not good for your health, or it's a bad example for the kids, or stop it right now, I'd probably still be smoking today. But it's been almost 30 years since I puffed a cigar. Why? Because she did that underhanded, sneaky thing that women sometimes do. She said softly, do it for me, dear, please. And then he writes in parentheses, a lot of men are going to be angry with me for letting their wives in on the great secret of how to get their husband to do things for them. Now, if you're the type of husband that when she says, do it for me, please, and it's something really important to you, this guy, he didn't feel smoking cigars was deleterious to his health. He felt it was okay. He needed something to chill out while he was driving for 6 hours. And the thing that stopped him is, do it for me. That's just a sign of a weak husband, right? The woman has complete control. Do it for me. She's getting emotional over here. You're a weak husband. You're a simp if you're doing that, Do it for me. Women like to be emotional. They like to do that. No, you're a man. You tell her, listen, this is what I need for myself. Don't interfere in my business. Do Do it for me. What about me? Do it for you? What about me? Right? If you're the king, you say, do it for me is ineffective because if she's the queen, but you're the king, who comes first? The king comes first. Do it for me. It's emotional, right? She's cajoling you. She's trying to get to be persuasive. Women are good at that. But if you're a real man and you know how to flirt with women, we'll talk about that in Shidduch Secrets, all about flirting with women. A successful man in Shidduchim or in flirting with women is a man, and he doesn't fail these tests, right? These emotional tests that the woman put to consciously or subconsciously put through to a man of do it for me, and crying. Okay, I'll do it for you, honey. I love you. If you're a man, you don't fall into this. The last two I don't agree with. The first two I do agree with. So at the end of the day, this is what he ends off the book with, basically, is communication. I don't know why he waited till the very end of the book to talk communication. Because communication essentially is the whole marriage outside the bedroom. I mean, I just affected because I explain what happens in the bedroom. But at the same time, that's basically what there is. A man is going to have his needs and wants, and a woman's going to have her needs and wants. And you have to first communicate honestly what's really bothering you, what you really want, and then you can negotiate. A successful marriage will have negotiation where you're trying to be fair. You're not trying to rip off the other person. You generally care about your spouse and you don't want to rip them off, but you want it to be fair, and it should be fair. It should be a fair negotiation. I don't know why we waited to the end of the book to talk about communication, because he should have started the book with communication. There's a book about marriage that Thera really doesn't talk about the bedroom, which is the main part of the marriage. So you're going to want to start off talking about communication. He ends the book with communication. I think that's a big mistake. And some of the ideas work for communication, not to do it in the heat of the moment, not to criticize in the heat of the moment, to do it from a perspective, I need this, as opposed to you're bad at something. But the other two are for simps, or people that don't understand the dynamic of a male-female relationship. So he does include at the end of the book, but it is the most important thing in marriage, communicate. But again, you have to have honest communication, and then you can reach an honest compromise. Hope you enjoyed today's lecture and most of this book. I'm going to do the recap, chapter 16, in 2 segments, either next week or the week after, and then we'll be on to dating and Shidduch Secrets. I'm sure you're all excited for that. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.